Well, thank you for coming on this Sunday. Welcome to the Kassy Club. Welcome for a number of reasons. The Kassy Club, I think, is having a little bit of a rebirth. We've launched a new website and we hope that you all subscribe to it. And if you haven't received an email recently, please give us your email address and we'll put you on the chain. There's a very special welcome to you all and thank you for coming. We are honoured today to have a special speaker, Mr. Nick Bogiatsis.
Perfect.
Correct? Bogiatsis.
You speak Greek very well.
And his wife Vasiliki, who have come down to us from Canberra. And also I'd like to thank John Tertulis for coming here. He is the director of the Hellenic Museum. He came and has gone, but I'd also like to thank Kathy Alexopoulos, the president of the Greek Australian Cultural League, and the vice president Kate Andronis, who are here from the Greek Australian Cultural League, and also Jasmine Kalis, who's flown in from Adelaide. Thank you for coming. We're delighted to have Nick here with us today to talk about Kastellorizian jewellery and other items. I can remember when my sisters were getting married, there'd always be this sort of jewellery with the coins, and I thought to myself, why can't I get one? I'd like to tell you a little bit about Nick before he starts his presentation. Nick hails from Canberra, but was born in Townsville, with Kastellorizian ancestry on both sides of his family. He has long had an interest in the culture and history of the island, having first visited 40 years ago. Have you been back?
Yeah, I'll be there on Friday.
You'll be there on Friday. And having gone through the agony of restoring a family home there. Nick has undertaken research on the island and co-authored with Nick Pappas, a barrister in Sydney, a major photographic history of the island entitled An Island in Time, Kastellorizo in Photographs 1890 to 1948, and has also written a set of short stories for children. Is Kastellorizo with a K or a C? A K, isn't it? A K. All those for K's, hands up. All those for C, hands up. I think the K's have it.
But the C's might be right. I'll talk about that if you like.
His particular interest in the cultural history of the island, what makes it unique and what is being lost. He is concerned that very little has been written on the role and lives of women on the island, and is keen to encourage the exchange of oral histories so that information can be passed to successive generations. And that's why we have the video people here, David Westbrook. I think we need to record these events that can go on our website, and we'll be having our Pleasant Sunday mornings, and all those will be videoed, and hopefully we'll have a lot of female speakers. But I'd like to encourage some of our older members to come and talk about their lives as a Kastellorizian in the early days. Now, my mother died recently, and my brother was able to find 2 tapes of his children interviewing my mother when they were 10 and 12. And he used that as the eulogy at the wake, and he took us up to the present time, and I concluded. But it was just fascinating to learn things about my mother that I didn't even know, about her life in Carlton and everything. So we need to capture this. Nick's in Melbourne, has a very busy schedule, but his willingness to come here and talk to us today is evidence of his commitment for all of us to learn more about our heritage. And hopefully today, Nick will go home perhaps having learnt a little bit more from us as he chats to people after the talk. Please welcome Nick Bogiatsis to the Kassy Club.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Very kind.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's very generous. I'm just looking around the room and seeing a fantastic exhibition, and I'm seeing people wearing some Kastellorizian jewellery, and everybody's keen to share. So let me say that who am I? While I'm a Kastellorizian on both sides of the family, I'm also learning. There's much to be learnt about Kastellorizo, and I'm hoping I'll learn a lot from the people here. So please feel free to ask questions, to add to what I'm saying, and that way we'll all learn. Now, it's taken me many, many years to put together a catalogue of terms of Kastellorizian jewellery, and Connie has very generously printed it out, and I'll hand that out at the end of the talk, so you can all have a listing and a bit of a definition of what some of the Kastellorizian jewellery is. If I've got any mistakes in it, please let me know. My phone number and email details are here. I can talk for ages, so feel free to ask questions as I go. And I'm happy to branch out beyond jewellery and coins to other collectibles like pottery and icons and carpets and clothing, if you would like me to. And if we don't have time for it as a group, I'm happy to talk to individuals afterwards. I've kept the rest of the day free for that, so see how we go. And before I forget, Chronia Pala for all the Panayotes, Marias, Panayotides, for Despines, who yortazid yesterday. So Chronia Pala. Okay. The other thing in terms of who I am, I need to declare myself, is I'm also a collector of things Kastellorizian. I found one of the best ways to learn is from the objects themselves, and preserving and hearing the stories of objects is an excellent way. But as a collector of things Kastellorizian, let me first say, I've entitled my talk, We Are All Custodians. We are all custodians of the objects from Kastellorizo, the stories from Kastellorizo, 10-year-old kids recording stories of things we forgot to ask. So we need to share and learn. So we're all students, we're all custodians of those stories and of those objects. And that's really important as well. So in terms of the objects, as a collector, I believe the best place for them to be is with the families who inherited them. And they shouldn't be passed down to the person who thinks, gee, that's worth a lot of money, why don't I get some of that? But rather to the person who's really going to appreciate it. And if it can't be kept in the family, then please ensure it goes somewhere where it will be preserved and looked after. In collections like this, in collectors, and as I declared with myself, and most importantly, whether they're passed on in the family or passed on outside the family, it's critical that the stories be recorded. If people are selling items, they want confidentiality or whatever, it's important those stories be written down. So some of us were lucky to have 10-year-old kids who asked grandma her story, some of us didn't. So whatever you know, write it down, that's really important. Okay, so that's who I am. Who are we? Who are we as Kastellorizians? Do we belong to the East or do we belong to the West? Let me say that the grandparents of everybody in this room, I'm going to be controversial here, nobody in this room has a grandparent who is Greek. Probably not Turkish either. So we might have been, don't tell your family secrets. Yes, we may have had Greek heritage, and that's what we did have. We had a Greek cultural heritage, just as your kids and grandkids have in Australia. But do they say they are Greeks or are they Australians? They're Australians of Greek background. And so with our ancestors, our grandparents, they were Ottomans of Greek or Christian background. Now, before the beginning of the 19th century, they would mainly have declared themselves as being Christian Ottomans, not as Greeks. They'd have seen themselves as Christian Ottomans. Now, we'll see a lot of the yelekakia, and I saw one earlier in the collection up the back there. Many of the yelekakia, you will see beautifully embroidered, exquisitely done, silver buttons, the whole thing. Yet on the back of them will be a very crude cross, stitched on very roughly. Nearly all of them, many of them. It's not to declare themselves as Christian. Kastellorizians were extremely superstitious, and almost everything was for the mati. So they put the crosses on for the mati. Think in Kastellorizo, there were 9,000 people, about half a dozen Turkish families. So why do you put a cross on your back to say you're Christian? Everybody was Christian on Kastellorizo, only half a dozen Turkish families. So it wasn't to show themselves as Christians, it was to yato kako mati. They put the cross on the back so that the evil eye wouldn't get them. I'm assuming everybody has better Greek than I do, so let's see how we go. So we're very much of an Eastern culture, a highly superstitious, religious-based culture, belonging to the East more than to the West. It wasn't until quite recently that we started looking to the West. Our clothing is purely Eastern. It has the look of Byzantium. It has the look, it's Ottoman. The gold stitching in our clothing is called Ottoman stitch. We are of the East. Our houses reflect that. In Eastern culture, you are simple on the outside, but rich on the inside. And Kastellorizian traditional homes were that. There are two styles of houses. The straight Georgian one with the peaked roof, very plain, two 2 windows and a door, 2 windows and a door. That's the traditional Kastellorizian house, originally with a flat dirt roof, and by the mid-19th century with a pitched clay roof. And then by the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, we started doing the neoclassical designs that Athens was doing, as we started looking more to the west. But we were very much an Eastern culture. These homes were plain on the outside, but blusia on the inside. When we first painted the interior of our house to the original colours, reds, deep reds, deep aquas, rich ochre colours. We had the Aussies, the Aussie Kassies saying to us, "No, they're trepeste. You must have allowed. They should be blue and white." We were never blue and white. Blue and white belongs to the other islands. We belong to the East. We had rich colours in our clothing and in our homes and in our carpets. And I'd love to talk about carpets if we've got time. Another concept I'd like you to think about in terms of how we presented ourselves is the concept of light. We used light. So when we wore our Kastellorizian jewellery, in the evenings by candlelight, the gold flickered. When the nifes walked, the gold flickered. Our cruces laines, those jugs over there, they flickered in the candlelight. Cruces, from crises. They flickered in the candlelight. So our jewellery, the things in our homes, was all about light reflection and megalia. That's very much a Kazi word, megalia. We showed. A woman who looked like that wasn't showing that she had a 36, 24, 36 figure. She was showing that her husband had 36,000 litres in the trapeza. Right? They're like peristeria, they're like pigeons. Little skinny Kazi ankles walking along, and the gunnes and the gold rattling, right? So the whole look was Ottoman. It was to show wealth, prosperity, and that people were comfortable. Very Eastern, not this Western sort of slim-waisted look. Okay, now this is going to keep clicking out on me, so I'll just click in again. The Kastellorizo gained enormous wealth. Think of a rock that's 8.8 square kilometres, 4 by 2 basically, that has no soil, no trees and no water, and yet enormous wealth. It did it through trade. Yes, we had the fishermen, but you don't get rich as a fisherman. Yes, we had the sponge divers. You didn't get rich doing the sponge diving, you got rich owning the fleets that did the sponge for the sponge divers that went as far as Libya, into the further east in the Mediterranean, throughout those areas collecting sponges and selling them to the west. But we got most of our wealth from Apenandi, from Mikrasia, Asia Minor, from the towns of Kash, which is now Andifilo, from Makri, from Kalamaki, from all those areas, with St. Patra, where St. Nicholas was born, to Mira, where St. Nicholas was bishop. Santa Claus, I tell my nieces and nephews, was Kastellorizian. All right, so let's go on to perhaps the jewellery itself. Why jewellery? Lots of reasons. A, we talked about showing your wealth. B, adornment, to look beautiful. C, mobility. If there was a raid, if there were if there was any sort of conflict, you picked up your prika and you ran, and you could take it with you. So it was mobile. You didn't wait for the banks to open to get paper money. You grabbed your krisa and you moved. So it was mobile. Jewelry was also practical. It kept your bukamiso closed for the women. So you didn't have buttons. You used the bukla to close your bukamiso. You use the bukla for the kalsa to keep your stockings up. Men use the albits, and we'll talk about that, to keep their fob watches in place. So it was practical reasons as well as megalia. But very much it was also about the mati. A lot of our jewellery links back to the Bogiatsis, the number of blue beads that are put into our jewellery. the idea of coins having some sort of spiritual value. All these things permeated the idea of jewellery. So they had a whole range of functions, not just doesn't this look good, but practical and spiritual reasons as well. Who wore the jewellery? Everybody, including the men. Kids wore jewellery, women wore jewellery, men wore jewellery. The only people who didn't wear jewellery were who on Kastellorizo? No, the priests wore more jewellery than the rest of us. No, we even put blue beads on the goats. The hires. The hires, of course, wouldn't wear jewellery because pera se hukai moito landramu, pera se zoimu, aftani ata tushalus. Until you found a new andra, then it came out again. And you dropped the hires and you were out there again in the nifika. And this idea of the gamo is really interesting too, because Kastellorizian men, I've got to find my language, I was going to use the word hopeless. Kastellorizian men had different traditions in relation to household duties. So if your wife died at childbirth, you had a mikro. You might have had 3 other kids, 6 other kids, and you had a baby. What do? We have records of the Andra marrying on the same day that he buried his wife. So he went to the cemetery, buried the wife, came home, and in the house, married again, because who was going to look after the baby that was just born? You're going to let the baby die with the mother. So, well, you always look for the biggest prika. If the kira had the prika, go for it. And the interesting thing about, we've got to understand the concept of dowries too, because we were raised, most of us in Australia, we lived a lot of our lives in Australia, and so we have this notion that the dowry is, tropi, zite se prika, tika ko, te parasmafta te pragmata. Not true. The dowry was a very logical thing. You think about perhaps yourselves or your kids, when they first get married and they've got all, they're living in a 2-bedroom place with 1 bathroom and they've got 2 kids and estrellas. And then when they finally got the 4-bedroom house and the 6 bathrooms, all the kids have left home. Right? So when we need the house, we don't have it. And when we don't need it, we've got it. Whereas the dowry system reversed that. So it did 2 things. It gave the woman the house, and the property went into her name. So don't go listen to all this rubbish I listened to when I was growing up in North Queensland about poor little Greek woman, Kathundeki, Metastavromenacheria. They know nothing. The Aussies knew nothing. Greek women ruled, and Kazi women in particular. Nothing more scary than a room full of Kazi women. So, see, they're patting their husbands saying, we feel sorry for you. So the dowry gave property rights to Kastellorizian women centuries before our Western sisters got property rights. Know it and be proud of it. And not only that, we're not only an incredibly capitalist society that gathered great wealth, but we're an incredibly socialist society that had free education, free healthcare for everybody in the 19th century. We're still trying to get in America way behind, and Australia was still battling to keep it. So it was a very progressive society in many ways. So the dowry wasn't a backwards-looking thing, it was a forwards-looking thing. So it did 2 things. It gave, I'll step back a little bit. What it also did for women was it gave them security. Think about it. If you're a daughter or you're a son and your sister gets married or you get married, and the son keeps working the family business, whatever it is, from the diving business or the horafia or the magazi or whatever it is, and 30 years later the parents die, and the kori comes back and says, well, where's my share? I said, well, I've been working this for 30 years. It was nothing until I took it over. I'm the kori, I want my share, right? You can't. We do that today because our society is different, but it couldn't work then. So what the dowry did was it gave women their share of the inheritance when they married. The woman had no further claim on the family's estate. So the son could then build up the business or crash the business or whatever, but the Gori had been given her share, and that was the end of her claim. So the dowry did two things. It guaranteed women their property rights, both in terms of inheritance and also in terms of ownership of the property. If she died without children, where did her home go? Where did her property go? It went back to her family, not to her husband. But if she died with a child, it stayed with the husband because that child would inherit it. So the property rights were with the woman and with her family. The cash went to the andra. You know, Ekosofranga, Chryses, went to the andra, so Heri to Gambru, but the property went to the woman. And the businesses went to the sons generally. Okay. So and part of the dowry was always the jewellery and the gold. Okay. And they wore the gold. You wore your prika. And they wore them on amarfies, which are these chains, either cloth chains they would sew them on, or chryses, or gold chains. And we've seen photographs, and there are quite a few in this room, of the nifes wearing their chryses. Kastellorizian women walked like this. Yati? You could show the jewellery. You weren't going to walk like this. Kastellorizian women walked like this, walked like this to show their jewellery. And how did they wear their earrings? Never criticise your grandchildren for having studded ears. My yaya, born 1904, had 6 earring holes. Common with Kastellorizian women, because you wore 6 earrings, anakisaxia. And how did you wear them? You wore, often the small coins would be on glostes. And so ears would be pierced up here to wear the small gold coins. Ears would be pierced, as 2. Ears would be pierced here to wear standard earrings and again gold coins. So that's 4. Where were the remaining 2 tripes? Earrings, not nose rings. Okay. The other 2 holes were in the cartilage here. Why? And that never heals. But why? Because it doesn't tear. So if you're going to wear a pendoliro here, you can destroy your ear. So you wore your heavy gold jewellery, earrings, in here. So you wore 6 earrings at a time. Okay? Often on glostes, so that all show at the same time. But the heavy ones, pierced here, and they never heal from here, but they don't tear, as you've seen many women with distorted lobes from the heavy jewellery. Very practical, very practical. But again, it enabled you to show what you had.
How long did it take them to take off the jewellery before they went to bed?
I always wondered how they had sex. Yeah, the clothing, and I could talk. I'd like to stay on jewellery for the moment, but clothing again. But again, the jewellery was such that you had to make sure your clothing didn't hide it either. So you'd have the chain to here, and then the cristes lides started from about here, so they would show. So what if the NIF is meant to wear all this gold, a chest plate of gold coins, when it became fashionable from about 1904, from the beginning of the 20th century, to start wearing Europeica, Gorimasini modernisa frem Europeica. How could you walk in a white Nifico Edwardian with a chest plate of gold coins? What was the solution? Because epinata dixis, ma then piene. I'll show you a photograph later on if you're interested, where the Nif is there in her Europeica, the little tiny waist and the white dress, and standing beside her is either her sister or a cousin, this high, wearing all the gold coins, standing right beside the Nifi. Don't think because we're not wearing them, we haven't got them. There they are. Okay? So the showing of your wealth was critical because that's how you survived. And that's why, again in the dowry system, it was the first Gori who got everything. Now think about the British royal family. It's the eldest son who gets everything. Right? you become queen, you've got the lot. Because if the eldest Gori gets most of it, then she marries the best possible gambro, a plusio gambro. And once you've got the plusio gambro, then other men will come in and marry the other Gores because, oh, we want to be related to Luca, to Barbuti, the big names, right? So I'll marry that girl because her sister's married to Megalo Soy. So I plug into that soy as well. And that's what the royal family does. The first one gets everything, and that way you're guaranteed that the other ones, the wealth stays, and that way the other ones marry well as well. Okay, so that's how the dowry system worked, and coins and jewellery were very much part of that dowry system. Who made the jewellery? Where did it come from? Everywhere. Good. Yep, Ottomans. Oh, I didn't finish up on that. We identified as Ottomans who were Christians. We were Christian Ottomans. In fact, we called ourselves Romans. Romi. Romios, agapise, Romia. Romiosini is Greekness, Romanness. And in fact, even today in the Arabic world, we're not called Greek Orthodox. In the Arabic language, we're called Rum Orthodox. Rum meaning Roman. So we identified ourselves as Romans, Christians, and Ottomans, just as we identify as Australians today. Not Turkey, Ottomans. Like being Australian isn't being English. Being Ottoman didn't mean you were Turkish. But we were Rumi, Roman Ottomans, or Christian Ottomans. Our great-grandparents probably wouldn't even thought of themselves as Greek. Excuse me. On Kastellorizo maybe, but in many areas of the Ottoman Empire, no. It wasn't until the beginning of the 19th century that notion of Greekness started to permeate, and they started thinking of themselves as Greeks and identifying with the Greek nation-state that had emerged. And we've all grown up, well, maybe Kazi's not, and it annoys me somewhat when I hear this, because Kastellorizians were very close to the Ottomans. We didn't have that, this Turkit and Varvarik. We didn't have that idea at all. We lived closely with the Ottomans. And to the extent, think about this in Australia today. If you heard of an Islamic community here in Melbourne or anywhere in Australia that went across the Middle East, took up arms against Australia, actual Australian soldiers, bombed Australian planes, shot them down, blew up Australian tanks, and then when the war was over said, we want to come back to Australia, what would we do? Don't answer it, but think about it. Well, in 1820, the Kastellorizians, who were Ottomans, part of the Ottoman world, when the War of Independence was occurring in Greece, went across to the Greek part and fought against the Ottomans, sank their ships, proudly announced they sank their ships, killed Ottomans, and then when the war was over and Kastellorizo had become part of Greece, said, oh, can we come home now? What should have happened? What would have happened? What would have happened today? And when we think about the Turks, what do we imagine happened? Well, the answer is nothing. The Ottomans said, come home. They're one of the most tolerant empires of the world, especially at the beginning when they took in all the Jews, when Europe was killing Jews. The Ottomans said, come here, you'll be safe. So it was one of the safest empires of the world, but of course by the 19th century, it had been going for several hundred years, was collapsing, was corrupt, and we had barbarity. But we had barbarity on both sides. So I'm not saying that to say Turks are wonderful, Greeks aren't, or Greeks are wonderful, Turks aren't, whatever. All I'm saying is history is complex. And we belong to a very complex history. We belong to the East. Okay. So where did the jewellery come from? We made some of it. Okay? We made boucles, we made the silver spoons, and I saw a set over here. I walked around too quickly. I'll go back to have a closer look. The filigree silver work, we made those on Kastellorizo. We made a lot of the jewellery there, but a lot of our jewellery was coin-based because it was transactional. And remember I said a lot of them were sewn onto these amartiers? There was a very good reason for that, because if times were hard, Gori, she could snip off a gold coin, tuck the others around, who'd notice? Right? Agamos come, gamo, tita gano, tosa angonia ekis, tosa anipsia ekis. Slip off another coin, megalia, hand over the gold coin. So when times were hard, you could snip a coin off and pass it on, sell it, move it on, give it as a doro, and hide, move the others around. When times were good, sewed them back on again. Right? So it was a money bank and worked as a money bank. So that jewellery was easy. The coin jewellery was easy. The other jewellery came from all over. We had Ottoman jewellery, we had jewellery from the east, we had jewellery from the west. And as we became more Western focused, we got more jewellery in from the west. So particularly when we were in the French period, 1915 to 1922, French influence was there. So jewellery was coming in from France. When we were Italian, from 1922 to 1943, Italian influence in the jewellery and in the styles. Okay? The people, I just want to touch on Kastellorizo's extraordinary history. We talk about the transition in Australia, moving from a Liberal government to a Labor government, from a Labor government to a Liberal government, and khalya for 18 months, 2 years, and by the time they settle down, we've changed again. That's just changing in the same political system from one party to another. In 40 years, how old are we here? I'm 39. In 40 years, Kastellorizo went from Ottoman to independent, to French, to Italian, to British, to Greek. I'm not talking about from Labor to Liberal or Greens. I'm talking about total changes from Ottoman, independent, French, Italian, British, and Greek. 5 completely different countries and cultures in 40 years. We have an extraordinary history, and we should know it and be proud of it. So as these change, we're influenced. So for hundreds of years, we're Ottoman, Eastern, and that's shown in everything in this room. But if you look at some items, you'll identify them as being much more European. I'm happy to chat about some of those as we walk around the room, as being more French and Italian, and as wherever they traded, they would pick jewellery up. Big influences from Egypt, but again, Ottoman influence. Okay. So that's where our jewellery came from, but we also made some. And I'd like to talk about a couple of pieces. We all know the buckler. Has anybody got a buckler?
American.
No. Okay, I'll mention that. Thank you. Do I have to give it back? Okay. So a buckler is a fibula. Fibulas have been worn since ancient times. Here's an example of a fibula. So in essence, what it is, it's a pin that's stuck in to hold 2 pieces of material together with a clip or a clasp to hold it so it wouldn't come undone. Romans wore them everywhere. You can find Roman fibula everywhere. Okay? That's a fibula. Here's another fibula, except it's missing its pin. What happened is when we came to Australia, our parents and grandparents said, so we took the pins out, filled in the middle, put in a stone, and put a clasp on the back. Beautiful cloth. On the back so we could wear them as brooches. But they were to hold the garment together, there were normally 6 of them. And the bottom one had a Maltese cross. Maltese cross is where the arms are equal on the bottom. Όταν καστρωμένη κόρη φαινόταν, the stavros poked out. So the kori was καστρωμένη, έγκυος. Okay? So the buckler was a practical item to wear, to hold your shirt together, bukamiso, the chemise. The way it's made is Kastellorizo was incredibly traditional because all around the world was alien. You know, there were always wars, there was always conflict. And if you were going to show who you were, everybody had to be the same. You didn't tolerate difference. Conservative cultures tend to be very constrained. So everybody did the same thing. They wore the same clothes, they wore the same jewellery. So these patterns are quite typically the same. And the buckler, the design is always floreate, in other words, using flowers. And there are 2 techniques used. One is wire work. And when you're walking around, have a closer look at some of the bucklers on display. So the wire work is used, and then these little granules or dots of metal. Now that granular work is called Etruscan work. There are other people who are in central Italy before the Romans were there. So Etruscan work is known as granular work. And in the early 19th century, late 18th century, Etruscan-style jewellery became very fashionable with this granular work. So our bucklers were floreate work, flowers, with leaves, sort of, with wire work and granular work or Etruscan work. How did you make these perfect little balls? Perfect little balls. How did you make them and attach them? What you would do is you would have these fine sheets of the metal, gold or silver, let's say silver, and you cut them into little squares. And you put an intense heat over the squares, and the squares would bounce up to a perfect ball. And they made perfect little spheres. And then they would attach them onto the jewellery. And that's how the granular Etruscan work was made, which is fitted onto the buckler. This is a classic Kastellorizian buckler, except for this middle modification that's been made. So, I have never seen a gold buckler. People will tell me about gold bucklers. I have never seen one. Because remember, these were put on and taken off every day. When you were scrubbing the floor, you wore your buckler. Now, you might have had two, otherwise your shirt was bucami so was eigentlich tot down to here. So you put it on and off every day. Gold wore out, gold broke, gold is soft. And why would you hide all your gold in bucklers that everyone was wearing when you could have them in gold coins, na Finlande? So they were gold dipped. Now, people often have two sets of bucklers, sometimes smaller ones and larger ones, sometimes silver, sometimes gold. And there's a beautiful silver one in the corner here. You'll notice later on. But the silver ones were often worn plain for Cathemerina, or they were gold dipped. Na Finlande, Plusia. Again, Plusia megalia. So this is a very beautiful piece, and it's a beautiful mandili. If we get to cloths, I'll talk about that again. So, Mary, please note I'm returning it. That's a lovely one you're wearing. Any question on bucklers? Okay.
What are they worth today to buy the booklets?
Let me just say, things from Kastellorizo can be worth next to nothing, or can be worth a lot of money. If they're solid gold, that has a gold value. If you take a buckler into your local, all the shops that buy gold and silver, and say, I want to cash this in, they'll check it and say, oh, this is just gold plated, it's made of silver weight, da-da-da. You know, I'll give you, I don't know, whatever the weight of the silver is, depending on the size of the buckler. You know, if you got $100 for it for gold value, $50 for it probably, you're doing well. But tell a Kastellorizian you've got a buckler for sale, and a collector like me, and it has different values. So it has cultural value. So there are three values. There's its inherent value, which can often be very low. Its cultural value, which is high for the people in this room, and its insurance value. And its insurance value is actually somewhere in between there. Yeah. Okay. What is this?
A brooch for the top of the head, for the scarf. No.
Okay. Yes, they're gold coins. In this case, they happen to be American. It's a Carfo Velona. We all wear them here, and I'm seeing one being worn as a brooch. Because when we came to Australia, just as we altered the buckler so we could wear it as jewellery, we wore these as brooches. At least it was a practical value. But originally their purpose, when we talked about practical, is to hold that heavy mandili onto the tsaki so that it doesn't fall off when you're walking. Yeah. And if you ever pick up one of those mandilia, they weigh a ton. I mean, they're very heavy. And if you're walking with that on your head, it's very easy for it to fall off. So this held it on. Again, when they came to Australia, you can stick this on your hat. No way. They wore them as a brooch. So that's a classic piece again. my favourite. Can you take it off us a little while I'll talk about two other Kastellorizian pieces, except again they're not Kastellorizian. Stravo fluri, okay? Stravo, because it's not round, it's stravo. Fluri, the notion that it's a coin. What are they actually? And when we came to Australia, I'll just take this. And if you didn't have one of this type, you had this type made, either in Kastellorizo or in Australia. Right? Taking a fluri and making it stravo with the crown around it. Right, so these are the original ones here. And what they show on one side is the baptism of Christ, and on the other side they show the resurrection of Christ. Okay. These are found throughout the Ottoman Empire, the Christians of the Ottoman Empire. Okay. It's found the Northern Balkans, Bulgaria, you'll find these. Kastellorizo, but this is Kasi. Kastellorizo, you'll find them there. And traditionally they were given at a vatisi, when the nono or the nonna would give it to the child stavatisia. Or later on, they would give it for stogamo, for whatever else, for special occasion. So that's your traditional stravo fluri, and these are what they were, ones that were made if you didn't have the original ones. Now the original ones are actually stamped. Just as a coin, here's an example. The design would be worked onto a heavy piece of metal. See how warm that is? It would then be placed on the gold and thumped, and that's how coins are made today. If you come to the Mint in Canberra, you can need some tourism, all you rich Melbourne people. And the coin is stamped, or the stravo fluri is stamped. So it's made from a stamp. Find one in Bulgaria, find one in Kastellorizo, absolutely identical. Okay. The other piece that we think of as very characteristically Kastellorizian is
For the
called?
babies. Hamaili. For the cot, for good luck.
Yeah. Okay. Now, all the literature calls them haimali, Haimali, haimali. But the Kazis in Perth, half of them are relatives, the Kazis in Perth insist that they're called hamaili. So the I, does the I go before the first A, haimali, or after the second A, hamaili? Okay. I can't answer that one. The literature calls it hamaili, but I'm haimali, but I'm too scared to be beaten up by the Perth lot to insist on that, and I'll say both are known. And I mentioned that I have this list of coin jewellery terms I'll give out to you. The last person to check it for me was Katina Kukulis in Perth, and she's made some changes to this, which has helped me again. And again, I'd ask if anything here you can add to or correct for me, I'd appreciate. So I'll call it a haimali, because that's what the literature calls it. What are they? What were they for? They're amulets. Exactly right. Again, an amulet, what does an amulet do? It protects you. It's to protect the child. When the child's born, they would pin it onto the cot of the child. The child would wear it later on. And we'd have smaller varieties that even grown men today will wear pinned inside their coats, or women will wear inside their coats. They'll say it has wax from the Aeon Tafun in Jerusalem. It has sand from Jerusalem. It has something from Aeon Oros. It has a piece of wood of the true cross. It has whatever in it, and it's this holy thing that will keep you blessed. And there's a variety of styles. The beautiful triangular ones, which my sister got, with the gold coins around that. I was given this one when I was born with Constantinata, and we'll talk about those later on. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I keep this one? Isn't this gorgeous? Okay. Tell your husband he's got to put the gold coins back on it.
Gee, thanks.
Look at the superb silver filigree work that's in that and the weight of it. Often in the centre, you'll see, and again, you'll see the granules, the granular work that we talked about, the Etruscans, that granular work, the silver filigree, and gold coins would be hung around that. You couldn't just take a gold coin off because it'd be noticed. If you really needed it, right? And bit by bit, the gold coins might have disappeared. But here, the missing gold coins would be noticed. So often they'd be all removed at the same time. Very beautiful piece. Often you'd see it with a blue stone or a red stone in the centre.
She had one stolen.
I don't want to hear that. The blue stone, Yatomati, and the red stone, Iya, the health. Okay? Beautiful pieces. I'll pass, please notice I'm passing it back. This one has the blue stone. I bought it in Turkey. Okay? And this is a family one. Okay? So you can see the variety of styles. You can also have square ones, and you can have different sizes. I only got 3 gold coins. My sister got 15. Okay, so the haimali put on the child and worn. In fact, Vasula wears this today on a long chain, and it works. The last one I'll talk about is the tserkiko, and Connie has a beautiful one in the cabinet over there. Okay, what are these? These fascinate me. Basically, they're cuff bracelets. Cuff bracelets. And right through the Middle East, traditional cultures give the bride a pair of cuff bracelets. In India today, a nephew will be given a pair of cuff bracelets. Still happens. These are normally part of a set of 3, however. So there's 1 for each wrist and the lemot. So the lemot was roughly double the size of this and set up like that. So this came all the way around and joined up, but sat here, that high. And it was the lemot. Again, my grandmother gave the lemot to my mother, and my mother says, so we got 1 bracelet, and the Yor got the other bracelet and the lemot. So, and I'm delighted. They appreciate it. So these come, the tserkino, where does the word come from? I mean, where did these come from? How are they made? I'm not going to be able to answer this for you, and I've been researching it for a very long time, but I'll talk about the little bit I do know. I was hoping the name might help me, tserkino. And there are 2, I have 2 theories at the moment on where it comes from. There's a Ottoman word, a Turkish word, zebe, which means chainmail, which means plaited metal. And zebe becomes zeve, zevika, tsefika. So it could come from the word zebe, or zeve in Greek, meaning chainmail or plaited metal, which is plaited metal, which is what these are. But there's also the Turkish word Cherkez, which means Caucasian, up in the Armenia, up in those areas, the steppes. Because in the early 19th century battle up there, a lot of the Caucasians were expelled, and some of them came into different parts of Turkey, but including the south coast of Turkey, where we're from, all of us are from. And it could be that they brought this design with them. In Constantinople markets, the jewellery markets, they call these Armenian. And Armenia is up where the Caucasians are. It's a Caucasian area. So does the word help us? It may. It may mean that's where they are actually from. But this is, to me, nothing more typically Kastellorizian than this. Except that I bought 2 silver ones from Bulgaria.
Maybe you'd like to see this one too.
Yep. I can come to that.
This is from my grandmother's mother gave it to her on Kastellorizo. So
Thank you. Yep. Notice this one's shaped in little triangles so that when it sits on the wrist, it descends down. It's triangular shaped on the escutcheon to sit more comfortably on the wrist. There are a number of, so again, it's a cuff bracelet. This is not the variety called the tserkiko, but again, if you get a chance, it's formed of two, as well as the escutcheon, which is closed in the same typical manner as the tserkiko, with the pin. In this case, a single pin. After the tserkiko will have a double pin, but it's made with two patterns. You'll have three, two. Well, it has basically the floret, the flower again, with the granule in the centre, which I said again was Etruscan work, granular work, typical on the boucles of Kastellorizo, and it has these little triangular discs, which are called spandrels. And the spandrel again, its whole intent. Remember, I asked you to keep in mind always that notion of light. So when you're wearing this, these spandrels would reflect the light as the woman wore it. So again, that glitter, that showing. Okay. May I return this? Keep going.
Really interesting variant on a theme with the 1908 date.
I'll come back to that.
So was it made in Australia?
I would say Egypt or Kastellorizo.
Yeah. Can I come back to, I'll keep this here, but I want to come back. Oh, I'll stay on bracelets for a bit longer then. Okay, here's basically a linen of rachioli, and they're made in a variety of ways. I've seen them single, double, and triple. Someone has told me there's quadruple. I've not seen a quadruple, I've only seen up to triple. And you can have them in several ways where the coins virtually join, where they're a little bit apart as they are here, where the misses lires, full lires, or different types of coins, Ottoman, European. In this case, these are classically English. The escutcheon on this one, again, is a double pin, and that can be easily fixed by a jeweller. And in this case, I think it's, the pin's there. And you can design the pins so they don't fall out. I can show you how to do that if you like. I'll just have a quick look to see. I'll talk to you about that. Yes, I can show you how it's done so it doesn't fall out. There's a special design aspect they make. This could well have been made in Kastellorizo because the escutcheon has been cast. Now, it's not hand worked. What they've done is they've created a cast and poured the gold into the cast. And this is a classic example of that. That'd be quite typical of provincial work, so I'd suggest it was probably made in Kastellorizo. What were they cast into? What was their favourite thing for casting? I'll give this back because I don't know. Who breeds canaries or budgerigars? Cuttlefish. So you know the cuttlefish bone, the white cuttlefish bone? They would carve into that the pattern that they wanted and then pour the gold into that and then take it out. And sometimes, this is a Kazi ring, and this does not show it. I should have brought one that does. If you look at some of your old Kazi jewellery, and if rings just look into here, and if there's lots of tiny little holes, it's been cuttlefish cast. Cuttlefish cast. Okay? So cast from cuttlefish.
I've got something interesting here, but nobody has any idea what it is. So I've just butt in at any time.
I keep the 11th item shown I keep. Okay. Again, it's a heymali, as we all know, with Ottoman coins. And I'm going to, if anybody has brought Ottoman coins, we're going to have a lesson on dating them. And I'll come back on this one because it's, there it is down there. I'll date this for you later on, but it's because it's a little bit unclear on one of the coins. I'll have a close look for it. What's it made from? That's I'm not sure on.
Black onyx.
Yeah, it looks as if it could be, but it's not cold. You always know if a stone's genuine. Put it to your cheek. If it's cold, it's a stone. And this isn't very cold. It could be because you've been holding it. And the hot-blooded that you are, it's Kastellorizian women. Also inlaid in a the Stark technique is very typical of the Middle East. And that black stone is also used in the Middle East. It's, give you the volcanic term? Obsidian. So there's a black obsidian was used on Kastellorizo, and it was polished. So on one side of this we've got it polished, the other side we've got it non-polished, with a white inlay which looks, it could be ivory, it's more likely to be a bone or almost a porcelain. But is a Haimali? I'll have a look more closely for you and give you the dates on it.
Christine, now she knows what it is.
Thank you, Christine. That's number 10, the next one's mine.
You say if it's cold, it is a stone or it's not?
It is a stone.
It is a stone.
Yeah. Put your face up to the to a marble piece. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. Right. All right. Can you hold this? Because I don't want to be holding jewellery. And I'll come to that when we talk about coins. This is very Western. It would have appealed to a Kastellorizian because A, it's shiny, good, and B, it's got a blue stone. Blue stone mati, again that notion of an amulet. This is Western jewellery. It's a locket. Yeah. The style doesn't look English. I'd probably say it's more French, something along those lines. But I can talk to you in a little bit more detail about that. Not traditional Kastellorizian, but the sort of thing a Kassi would love to have bought in their shopping. I want to talk about men's jewellery. I'll talk about two more pieces of. That's the next. This one I'm going to come to.
Oh, okay, all right.
We don't want the men left out of this. Oh, I'd love one. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks. As the men said, so what do you give a man? You give him rings, cufflinks, gold coin cufflinks, or even filigree cufflinks, but the gold watch was the big marker and the chain that went with it. So what do we call these? Okay, so the man wore this usually on his vest. So we all know the bar, the T-bar, went through the buttonhole. So that secured it. I won't put it on properly. Might be easier in the end. So that went through the buttonhole. So then Khanete. Oh, sorry. Thanks for that. So that goes through the buttonhole so it doesn't get lost. And notice in this one, the chain goes backwards and forwards for several reasons.
Here's the watch for it.
Oh, I'll take that.
Let's have a look at that one.
Okay. Can you hold it? And I'll come back to it, so I'm not holding too many things. This is actually called an Albert. In English, it's called an Albert, from Prince Albert, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. So the chain is a fob chain or an Albert. Men have a fob pocket. That's your fob pocket, and in your fob pocket went your fob watch, which is what we've just seen there. So often the gambro would be given the gold watch, and it was a fob one on a cadena. Now, it could be worn just with the watch, or if he had a gold sovereign case, a gold case that they kept their sovereigns in, or if they had a gold vesta or a silver vesta, which is a case you kept your vestas in. What's a vesta? A match. So your match case. So if you had a gold sovereign case or a gold or a vesta case, often in your vests you would have two little pockets. So your watch went into one, and your vesta case or sovereign case or whatever else went into the other. So this is called a fob. This is called a fob chain or an Albert, and it held your fob watch. okay? And you want to hold it up and show people the gold watch? That's a full hunter, and I can talk to you about it if you like. I don't know much about full watches, but it's a full hunter watch, and it opens up in the front and the back, often key wound, and some of them are chain driven. Now, they often say one problem has two solutions. No, two problems have one solution. Okay? So for years, I've wanted to know two things. I've wanted to know what one of these is. And Vasila, do you want to hold up? Do you want to hold it up? It's yours. Right? I've wanted to know what one of these were. No one could tell me what they were called. And the other thing was, nobody could tell me what a selinato was called. What a selinato was. I kept hearing this term selinato. I'd asked all the old cases I knew. Anybody here know what a selinato is? Okay. I thought, like a lot of the coins, and we'll get to... Oh, I've been talking an hour. I'll finish off on jewellery and do coins, and I don't want to hold you up too long. Nobody knew what a selinato was, okay? And I thought, just like with the coins, you'll have a Louiso from a French Louis. You'll have a Napoleons from Napoleon. You had all these coins named after places. So I thought a selinato was from a Cellini. We're all old enough to know what the Cellini was, a shilling. So that's what I assumed. It had to be something to do with the shilling, okay? It turns out I had two problems I couldn't solve. There was one solution. This is a selinato. Well, you're very close. Very good. Let me just check. So selinato, I thought, came from Cellini, which is a shilling. But Cellini is written that way. It's actually a Cellini written this way. And what does that look like? Why are we called Hellenes? Why are we called Hellenes? Why? Right. The Romans named the peninsula that is modern Greece after the earth goddess called Graecia. So we are called Greeks. Graecia, Greeks, came into the Western language, Greco. The Greeks called the peninsula after the moon goddess, Selina. So we are all from the moon goddess, Hellenes. Panselinos, full moon. Selina, the witch. Right? So that's why we're called Hellenes. And this is named from the moon. And it's the idea that a moon or a full crown surrounds the coin. Now the coin, these... these are children's jewellery. They have, again, go to your local jeweller, say, how much would you give me for this? And they'll say, well, the coin's a bronze or a copper or a base metal, a Billion coin. The coin, it's been badly damaged because it's been stuck into one of these. I'll talk about the coins later. So the coin might be worth £5. I mean, it might be 1,000 years old, but it's lots of Byzantine coins around. It's base metal around it. Who's going to wear that sort of thing today? I'll give you $10 for it. Okay? Show it to a cat. Show it to me. I assure you I'll give you more than $10 for it. Okay? This is worn by children. Because again, big and flashy. This has been dipped in gold, and they were traditionally dipped in gold. And the piece that we're shown here has been recently dipped in gold. So you see the full beauty of it as a gold thing. But the coin is normally a bronze or a copper, and it's a cheap metal, beautifully embellished on the, basically embellished on the outer rim, and comes from the notion of a moon, or the notion of Tiselenis, also called the Constantinato. So I'm going to go from that into coins. Can you stand another 10, 15 minutes if I do coins?
Can I just ask a question?
Please.
About
Yeah.
jewellery.
Please.
They must have been very skilled in whatever primitive tools and things that they have to be able to produce all this type of jewellery. The question is, where did they get their gold? And was it gold coins which they melted down to produce these pieces of jewellery? Or where did it come from? And where were they taught the trade to produce that sort of equipment? Yeah.
Look, remember we're part of the Ottoman world, and if you look at Ottoman jewellery, it's spectacular. Look at Indian jewellery. Next time you're travelling in Singapore or whatever, look in the Indian jewellery windows, and there's exquisitely stunning jewellery, a lot of it with that granular work or Etruscan work, which they've continued to do as the Middle East has continued to do. It stopped being done in the West and was revived. So those skills existed very much in the Middle East, and these people traded around the world, around the Middle Eastern world, and gained their gold from trade. They melted down gold coins. That's how you got your gold. That gave you 22 carat, depending on what country, British sovereigns, 22 carat. You melted it down depending on how rich the Gambros family was, or how innocent the Inifis family were, and they didn't know it got melted down. And they melted it down. So the skills, if anything, the jewellery is a little bit coarse that comes from Kastellorizo. It doesn't have the refinement of the urban centres. Now the significance about Kastellorizo is its equidistance between Alexandria, Beirut, and Izmir, the three great trading points of the Middle East. You know, that's like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan today, and we're equidistant from it. That's why we got taken over so often. And so we had access to all those skills. But if you look at our iconography, if you look at our jewellery work, it's provincial. It's not the sophistication of the urban centres. And if I've got a list of what's the oldest piece of jewellery from Kastellorizo?
The oldest piece.
Yeah, another piece of jewellery.
2,500 years old? Remember the gold Stefani that was found in the tomb up in Aios Yoristuvunu? Gold Stefani made of ivy leaves, about 2,500 years old. It's the oldest piece of jewellery on Kastellorizo.
Where is that?
It's in the museum in Athens.
Is it?
Yeah.
I asked and I got told off. You Americans, you sit with the Germans and do deals. I said it's in the basement. And
Yeah.
he said, fear.
Yeah. And we asked, further to your question, the jewellers on Kastellorizo were Antonios Fundas, he was working around 1920. There's Proyenisteri, Avienikos, Kakas, who actually came from Simi and worked on Kastellorizo, so again, that movement and sharing of skills. Hadzidoulos. Melbourne has the family Chrysochos, who had to have been jewellers. And today we've got Karayannis, who until recently has been making the traditional boucles, but he keeps saying, oh, Ateliosha Tora, so we'll see what happens there. So they were the jewellers of Kastellorizo.
I like to think that probably we have all the hands the other eye. But were other islands as our daughter that have this type of jewellery?
Yes and no. The thing about Kastellorizo is we showed it. In Sydney and probably in Melbourne also, your major Greek communities to settle were Katherian and Kastellorizians. Katherians have soil and water. Kastellorizo doesn't. So they worked the land, we traded. And we have a quote from an 18th century French diplomat who was in Kastellorizo. And he says, if you come from a place that has water and soil and rich bounty, you'll work as a peasant and remain poor. But if you come from a place that has nothing, you will trade and become rich. And Kastellorizo evidences that. So that's a,
That's why a lot of places are dealers.
yeah. And the Katherians The Kazis call the Kastellorizians Koreani. Is this going to be on the internet? Villages, and the Kastellorizians call the Kazis Fantasmeni. Derek tipo tatore do Paddington che per patate per the malamaticasas, the nafta Fantasmeni. Right? And now we're all intermarried. Okay, can I promise not to hold you much longer. Let me talk about a couple of coins then. There are a number of Ottoman coins people are wearing, or people may have, that I indicated people might be interested in having dates given. Let me tell you how to date an Ottoman coin, roughly. This is the Ottoman numerals. 1, you can remember that one? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? So now in 622 was when Muhammad was pushed out of Mecca where he was born and sent to Medina. And so that's the beginning of the Hajj. That's where we got our name, Hajji. We can talk about that if you like. That's the beginning of the Hajj. So that's the beginning. So they take that as the beginning of their calendar. So their calendar for a start is 622 years, starts later than ours. Secondly, their year is shorter than ours. And we adjusted our calendar. By the way, in a lot of Kastellorizian Hartia, if you look at Bricko Symphona, you might see a lot of them written like that. Why do they have these two dates? Because that's the date that the Orthodox world shifted from one calendar to the next. We moved forward, we jumped 2 years. So the Hartia would be marked 1916 for the old calendar, and we talk about the Paleomeroloi, Merolites, who still work on the old calendar and still have Christmas on the 7th of January, as we always did. So we put both dates on to show the old calendar and the new calendar. So look for these numerals on your coins, and a lot of the coins will be this. Whoop. Sorry. A lot of Kastellorizian coins are this date, which is 1223. And that equates to 1808. Right? So when you're looking at your coins, look for these numbers, read what they say, and if you remember 1223 is 1808, because many of them are 1223. I think a lot of them were falsely made and printed 1223. It was also a period of reforms in the Ottoman Empire, so the currency was revised and refreshed. So a lot of our coins are dated 1223, which equates to 1808 in a nutshell. Now, the coin I particularly want to talk about is what we Kazis call the Constantinato, right? Very important coin. Our main church is Konstantinos and Eleni because St. Helen is meant to have landed there, taxied a church to be built. It's believed that that's been found under the Konstantinos and Eleni, but you need an archaeological permit to dig it because there's been a strange structure identified under which again I can talk to you about if you're interested. And then she went on to Jerusalem to find the cross of Christ. So Constantinople is very important to our island. We think the coin of Constantine is very important, and I can see several in the room. I can see 3 over there, and I'm holding one at the moment. And there are some others I think I saw in the cabinet. So what we call a Constantinato is pretty confusing. What the coin shows, and Vasilo can show them to you later on if you're interested, is it has Constantino standing, holding the cross of Christ, and Eleni kneeling in front of it. That's why it's called the Constantinato. And at the back is a mandala of stars with the Panagia inside. Okay? So we call this a Constantinato because this is a Kastellorizian story. I might have to stop on this. I've got more to talk about, but I'll must get this one in. The Kastellorizian story is Eleni left Kastellorizo, got to Jerusalem, with her soldiers. Now remember Constantine faxied his way to the throne, killed his brothers, killed his dad, got the throne, had everybody against him, so shifted his capital and took on a new religion to break the power of the old religion and the old Senate. And so they needed a symbol. Just as medieval times, They went for the Holy Grail. Remember the Crusaders for the Holy Grail? Well, 1,000 years before that, Constantine and Helen, to unite this new religion, went for looking for the cross of Christ. So Eleni arrives in Jerusalem. They're looking, aren't finding anything. We're talking 300 years after Christ has died. So one day she's out and she sees this young peasant girl digging up this plant. And she asks the girl, it's his first thing in the morning, Gori tiganis? And the girl says, there's this sweet smelling plant which grows here. I take it out, I plant it in my garden at home, it dies. But when I come back, there's another plant growing. So she says, this is a sign. So she got the soldiers to start digging, and they dig on a hill, dig, nothing. Soldiers are sick of this, want to go home. So Lenny goes out and mints these coins and buries them in the vuno at night. So the soldiers come, chrisa, digging. They finish the work. The next day she goes out, sticks some more in the soil, they dig. And finally they find a stavro, and another stavro, and another stavro. Remember there were 3. So what happens? Just so happens at that moment, a funeral's passing. Stop the funeral. I'm the Empress of Rome. Stop the funeral. Put one cross on the grave. Dipota. Put the next cross on the grave. Dipota. Third cross on the grave. He comes back to life. This is the cross of Christ. So the coins are called Constantinades from coin of Constantine, showing Constantine and Helen. The plant is called the plant of the king of Vasiliko. And the cross is then cut up and distributed around the world. Great story, wonderful story. None of it's true. These coins are in fact Venetian ducats. Whoever went to school and studied Shylock, Shakespeare's Shylock, a pound of flesh for 40 ducats, 40 gold ducats. These are Venetian ducats. And what they show is St. Mark, the patron saint of Venice, holding a staff, and kneeling before him is the King of Venice, or the Doge, Duce, Mussolini, Duce, Doge, the Doge of Venice, kneeling in front of him, and the name of the Doge of the time is written on the side, and from that, if anybody's wearing some, and I can see a couple here, I can date them for you as to when they... None of them have dates on them. Well, we'll come back to that. And in fact, I said to my yaya, between the standing St. Mark and the Doge is... And when my yaya showed me her Constantinata, I said, yaya su klepsa nepseftika pragmata, because I've just been to school, and school taught me Roman numerals. And the Roman numerals, I know D is 500, I know V is 5, and X is 10, and you can't have it that way. So that makes sense. These are false coins with false dates on them. This is pseudo pragma, being a smart little kid at school who's just learned his Roman numerals. But it actually is, the DVX is actually DUX, meaning dux, or duce, or doge, meaning king or ruler. So I thought it was a date, but it actually is the mark of the king. So these are the Constantinates that were meant to be minted by Empress Eleni, but there are other coins we call Constantinates, because in Byzantine times, the Byzantines printed coins with, and this one's dated 1077, and it's Michael VII. And it was that I am the Byzantine emperor, I rule the world, and I rule the world in the name of Christ, who rules the heavens. And my authority comes from Christ. So on one side, I have Christ, the ruler, who rules the heavens, and the other side is a little old me, and I rule the world, and I want you to know it. Okay? Now, on a number of occasions, there'll be 2 emperors, so you'll see 2 figures, or there'll be the emperor and the empress together. So we saw that wherever there were 2, we said, Konstantinos and Eleni, Constantinata. So there's a whole variety of coins, Byzantine bronzes, Byzantine golds. Wherever we see 2, we say it's a Constantinato, or classically, this Venetian ducat, which we call the coins of Constantine. But whatever they are, they're important to Kastellorizians because we believe they are from Constantine and Helen, therefore they have a spiritual value, therefore we're back to the phylactor, it protects us because it's Konstantinos and Eleni that we're wearing. Very important in that sense. I'll do my last thing on Byzantine coins. The ancient Greeks were utterly hopeless in their numbers. They had no system for writing numbers down. The Arabs were much smarter than a lot of us, and we use Arab numbers today. I could talk to you about that if you're interested. So the numbering system is absolutely ridiculous. So one of the many systems they have, so if any of you have Byzantine coins, this does not, you'll see an M, a K, an I, or an E on them. And all that meant was their coinage were numis, N-U-M-M-I, and M was 40 numis, K was 20 numis, I was 10 numis, and E was 5 numis. So that's their numbering system. Mess. The Greeks just couldn't get their numbers right. And so if you see M, K, I, well, if I show you, they use letters of the alphabet, they change them all the time. And if you try writing, and if you take even Romans are even worse, well, as bad. You try writing down a Roman numeral, well, they're multiplying it by 36 in Roman numerals, it's impossible. The Arabs developed a brilliant system which we use today, and I can explain the background to it if you're interested. But a lot of the Byzantine coins are actually called trachi or skiphos when they're in this shape, which is bowl-shaped. So you can see in the centre of this, there's a small coin worn on this side because it was worn that way, and this side rubbed. On this side you can see more of the gold where it was dipped. And has the emperor on one side and Christ on the other. And they're bowl-shaped or cup-shaped, which comes from the ancient Greek word skiphos, meaning a cup, or trachi, because they were rough-edged. So we have a lot of Kastellorizians will have Byzantine, usually bronze coins, in that shape, which are called skiphos or trachi. Look, you know, pendolires, dilires, lires, misolires. A mazzaria, the proper word for Hungary is magia. The Hungarian, who collected stamps when they were kids? Magia, say it in Greek, mazzaries. Mazzaries, so the mazzaries are the large, they're the size of a pendoliro, but much less value because they're much thinner. Big gold coins with Franz Joseph on them, mazzaries. Luizu, you'll have that whole variety. Now I've got some questions. I'm just conscious of how long I've taken. So is it best if I break and people can ask me questions? But I'll take that one quickly.
Just want to know if you've heard of a dubla.
Dubla, yes. Dubla come from the doubles, doubloons. You know, Spanish doubloons. You know, does it have the? No, that it could have, but that's probably more like the mazzaria. If you've got one, I'll have a look. But the mazzaria has the double aeto and the Franz Joseph on the front. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a number of things, but can I just very quickly talk about carpets? If anybody's got a Kazi carpet, just in terms of the storage of them, if you've got a guna, please take it off a coat hanger because the sheer weight of it will destroy the shoulders. They must be folded or better rolled. If you've got a Kazi carpet, and I'll take this very beautiful example here. These carpets are often called roditica because they were marketed through Rhodos. They're actually from Macri, or now called Fethiye, opposite Kastellorizo. And our Kazi carpets are mainly from Macri, and today they're called Megri carpets. Megri from the town of Fethiye. Please don't roll it this way, which is your instinctive way to protect the top where the design is. That busts all the knot work at the back. You must roll it that way, okay? Under that way. And I'll leave that piece that way so you can see the way it should be rolled. And never fold them. Roll them and don't put them in plastic, put them in an old sheet to protect them. Roll them in that way and in a sheet. I want to talk a lot more about preservation of items, but I think I better stop there. One last question.
Could you please tell me the true meaning behind
Right. By the way, this may be a dubla. This is it has the double aeto, and it's the Austrian Queen Marie Therese. These are also called the dubla, but they're in the silver, not in the gold. But the gold ones are, yeah. Yeah, it's probably, is it gold? Yeah, okay, we'll come, I'm happy to talk to you later. These I'll leave here, and people can, this is listing of coins and jewellery. Please feel free to take one. My details are at the top. If you want to ask me questions, email me, phone me. If you know anybody, my yaya gave her full photostat to the museum on Kastellorizo and it disappeared. I'll do anything to get a guna, almost anything. My wife's here. So do feel free to contact me about anything. And anything that you can let me know, I'd be delighted to learn. Here's a photograph of Kastellorizo you may not have seen before. It was taken by an Italian plane in 1943 as it was flying over Kastellorizo to bomb it. So you might want to have a look at that. This is seconds before the bombing of the island. The symbol of Kastellorizo, okay, in Western terms, cross, heart, and anchor. Faith, hope, and charity symbolises three things. For Kastellorizians, symbolise three things. They didn't always have the three. Sometimes they only had the cross and the heart, the cross and the anchor. The cross, of course, saying we're Christian, not that we're Greek, that we're Christian. The anchor, showing that we're fishermen, traders, we live from the sea. And the heart to show charity, because remember I said in the 19th century, free education, free healthcare for everyone. Most of the world still doesn't have that. Thanks. Sorry.
Well, what can I say? What a fabulous talk. I'm going to go and rummage around and see what I've got left. Although, interestingly, this morning my wife comes up to me with 2 gold coins, wanting to know what we're going to do with them. Now I've got a couple of ideas, darling, what we're going to do with those 2 coins. So Nick, that was fabulous, and I'm sure we've all appreciated the time and effort that you put into this talk, and it's not easy to stand up for an hour and a half and talk, but it's fantastic, and we have captured this on video, so this will be a legacy to you and to the Kastellorizian Club. It'll be on our website, and we'll send you a copy, and it's something that we, I think, have thoroughly enjoyed. So let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
It was just fabulous. And we'd like to present you with a little present for coming down and talking to us, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. I think when the word gets around, people will be flooding in with all their jewellery. and finally, I'd like to thank Connie Gregory for all her hard work.
Hey!
and putting this together. And we've got a little present for her. And, you know, it does take a lot of energy and enthusiasm and emails and all those sorts of things. And the cutting of a new key so she can get access to the club. And so thank you again, Connie, for a wonderful event. And thanks again, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you.